When Brett Victor talks about making programming more accessible to the masses, easier to learn, easier to do, he talks about two different things that we can control: the API for the code and the graphical interface for the code. And there are two things with the graphical interface: how you inspect it and how you debug it. And that's what I'll be talking about today. If you believe Brett Victor, we don't live in the golden age of programming. Not yet. We live in the Stone Age. And what we can do in the future will just blow your mind. And there are a couple of reasons why I'm excited about DevTools today. It's going to get much, much better. For the first time, both Chrome and Firefox have hired full-time designers. They both have one designer. Max works on Chrome. Helen works on Firefox. They're both great. Developer tools have never been built with a product mentality before. Now we're thinking that way. The other reason I'm excited about DevTools is that both Chrome and Firefox have been open from the beginning, but hard to contribute to. That is changing. Both Chrome and Firefox are working on making it easier to contribute to. And when that happens, we can involve the community in making DevTools better, and it will become better. If you think about it, DevTools are tools for developers. Developers should make DevTools better too. I'm here today to show you how you can get involved in making DevTools better, how they work, and that's what I'm excited about. So I'm just really excited to share that with you. My name is Jason Lasser. I work in Mozilla on the Firefox DevTools team, and you can follow me here. I'm actually relatively new to the team. I've only been there 3 months. So when I've given this talk before, it's been as an outsider saying, wow, this stuff is really cool. And now I get to say, this stuff is really cool. And I have a little bit more knowledge. When I've given this talk before, I've jumped right into the code. Today I'm going to talk about the project as well and the people behind it. And it turns out that if you want to understand DevTools, you should take the time to understand the people and ask them questions. Both teams are really open, and they want to talk to you. So here's a snapshot of the Firefox team. This is about 8 of us at a work week. The Firefox team is totally distributed, so there are about 20 to 30 people living across the world. 1 person in London, 2 in France, Amsterdam, Canada, Vancouver, Toronto, you name it. I'm in New York. I'm the only one in New York. So we get to meet in these fun places. Like this was a picture in Toronto a couple months ago. This is where we really live. And you can go there too. That's the URL for our IRC room. It's not Slack, but it's still pretty good. And you can ask us any questions, and you can see what's going on. We have an issue tracker called Bugzilla. But we also have a page to bring new people in that show issues for good first bugs and issues that are mentored. So when you come in, you can find an issue that you can contribute to and people who really care about helping. It's really great. And believe it or not, we have docs on how to get involved. So you can Google search, get involved in Chrome DevTools or Firefox DevTools. And you can find our Twitter, the IRC room, the bugs, everything right from there. And then, of course, like how to download the code, which you probably want as well. And that's the team. What about the future? So DevTools fundamentally hasn't changed that much in the past 10, 15 years. I guess it's gotten better, but not in a way that might be obvious to a user. So I want to remind you that DevTools can get much, much better. The way some of my friends talk about it is actually like that. And like we can fix it. And what I think has really happened is that applications have gotten significantly better over time with frameworks and whatnot. And DevTools have gotten better, but maybe have like lagged behind in some ways. So how do we do that? Well, one way is by involving the community. There are all these tools now for debugging React, Backbone, Angular, or whatnot. What if DevTools incorporated those ideas right inside them? Hot reloading. How many people have used hot reloading? I'm just curious. OK, a decent number. This is when you change something in your editor, and then you see in your app immediately. So you get this instant feedback loop. I think we ought to start thinking about DevTools as one thing. How do I make changes and see them? How do I look at the app and see the data? As DevTools gets better, that's just going to become very, very intuitive. And I have some examples at the end. And with that, we can jump into the fun stuff. So I have 3 examples for you. The first is how you can get involved in Firefox. The second is how you can get involved in Chrome. See, I work for an open source company, so I get to promote Chrome as well, because I don't care what you use. I want everyone to make it better. And the third will be the new debugger that I'm working on. And this is one that will debug Firefox and hopefully Chrome and Node and maybe a web view in iOS or Android. It'll be a JavaScript debugger. And I'm excited to show that to you as well. This is also the nerve-wracking part where I just program in front of you guys. So if you notice anything, let me know. If I mess up, let me know. If something's cool, let me know, because it's kind of nervous. But that's all right. So let's do Mozilla first. All the code for Firefox lives in this repo called Gecko. Mozilla loves code names, and Gecko is the code name for Firefox. It has everything you need for DevTools, but also everything you need for building an entire browser. So if I do this command mock run, and by the way, I could have cloned the repo in front of you, but it's kind of big, and I don't trust the Wi-Fi, so you have to take my word for it. When I run mock run, it's going to open my own version of Firefox. So this is not the one that's the official Firefox. This is this is nightly. This is the latest version in Git. And it has all the changes that I might want to make. So if I go to this website, ToDo MVC, I honestly spend my days looking at ToDo MVC now, which is kind of sad. I can open up the debugger. And Firefox has this option I can turn on, which exposes the browser toolbox. Now, I don't know if Chrome has something similar, but the browser toolbox is really, really cool. It's DevTools for Firefox. You can inspect Firefox. You can debug Firefox. It's pointing it on itself. So let's have some fun here. Let's use the magnifying glass. The URL bar, tabs. See what we're doing here? DevTools. You can have a lot of fun with this. If you're looking for something to do, just go home and play with it. It's pretty cool. So what color should we make this? Green? That's kind of ugly, right? That's kind of nice. And maybe the search bar, too. Well, you know what I'm doing here. Tabs. You can go find that. This one over here. Oops. You can do this stuff. You can also do it for DevTools. Most of DevTools is just an HTML, CSS, and JavaScript app. That means if you're a web developer, you can change that thing. You can make it better. Or you can make it worse. I can go in here, find this one, and we'll make it something else. So we have the debugger, we have the inspector, and we can change the layout, the looks of it. We can also change how it works. So for this demo, I was trying to think of something that would prove you can do whatever you want. And when it comes to debugging, my favorite example is breakpoints, because breakpoints let you pause. But how do breakpoints work? So what we're going to do, and this might seem evil, but that's OK, is we're going to study how breakpoints work by finding the function that adds a breakpoint, and then we're going to add a breakpoint to it. And then we're going to add a breakpoint, and we're going to see the add breakpoint function called, and pause at that breakpoint. Right? So unfortunately, Firefox is thousands and thousands of files and millions of lines. So it takes a little while to load and a little while to search. But up here, you can find any file or any function. And I can never remember where this file is, or this function is, so I just search for it. And it searches the entire Gecko code base and comes back with a list of results. And something I really like about the Firefox debugger. But it does take a second. Yes. I don't know where it is, but it does. Cool. So there's this blob of code for add breakpoint. And I can add a breakpoint to it. And now I contend that when I add a breakpoint in the debugger, the browser toolbox add breakpoint function is going to be called. I hope this works. Here we are. We have now paused. We have debugged the debugger. And you can break the debugger, improve the debugger. You can do anything you want. This is just JavaScript. It's not magic. In fact, it's better than just JavaScript. See how we're using ES6 here? We're using ES6, and we're not transpiling because we're running in Firefox. I don't need to do IE8 stuff anymore. It's just a really fun place to be. And that's Firefox. Now let's look at Chrome. So I have this folder for Chrome DevTools, which has Chromium, which is like Gecko for all of Chrome. And it has just the front end. And that's frankly a little easier. The front end is just like 15, 20 megabytes. In Chromium, gigabytes. And with the front end of Chrome, you can run it locally. So you don't have to open all of Firefox. So let's do that. I'm going to use Python, simple server. It doesn't really matter what I'm using. I'm just hosting DevTools as a web app. It's kind of mind-boggling that you can even do it. And I'm going to open Chrome with a couple flags. Now, I didn't know you could do this before I did Chrome DevTools work, but Chrome has a binary, and you can pass some flags. The only one that really matters is that you want Chrome to run with this remote debugging port, 92222, which allows our DevTools app to connect to the Chrome browser. And when we do that, we can go back to To-Do MVC, of course, right? Like, this is how I spend my life these days, looking at To-Do MVC. And we can debug it. But we're not debugging it with Chrome. I mean, we kind of are using Chrome. We're debugging it with our local web app. I guess it still works. Still talking to Chrome. But it's a web app. And once it's a web app, well, you know how to inspect a web app, right? When I'm doing this stuff, I talk about I1, I2. I1 is the inspector that I'm working on. I2 is the inspector for I1, right? And you can do this at home. You can do I3, I4. See what we're doing here? When the inspector is undocked, Command-Option-I opens another one. And you can use I4 to inspect I3, and I3 to inspect I2. Like, actually, you can just like take a look at the stuff. It's totally there. And once you see DevTools as a web app, you never see it again the same way. It's different. You think, like, what do I want to add? What kind of things do I want to do? Maybe I want a screensaver. I don't know why you want a screensaver, but I did at one point in time. And DevTools is kind of a simple app. Well, it's not, but it's a JavaScript app, so you can debug it. And so if you want to add a screensaver, well, I have this function called lol_screens. You see where I'm going here? When I do that, and I should lol, I show the cat, and I hide the panel. When I shouldn't lol, I hide the cat, show the panel. I mean, it's like not profound. Anyone could write this code. But we just did that in DevTools. It's a web app. In fact, contributing to DevTools is probably easier than contributing to React because it's just a web app. What else do you want to do? Well, as soon as I realized this, I wanted to know everything. I wanted to know how it worked. I wanted to understand the debugger. I wanted to understand the inspector. I wanted to know how things like editing attributes worked. Like, how do you edit an attribute? How do you edit as HTML? And when I learned that, I realized I could do other things too. So here's an example of that. I made this little barrel roll function. I haven't contributed this back yet, although maybe I should. And it just does that. So element, tree element. There's this class called element tree element, which doesn't sound intuitive, like elements, trees, element. Like, why? And the reason for that is that you also have object tree elements or other things like that. And a tree element is just a node in a tree, and an element tree element is an element in that big markup tree over there. So it defines everything you need for edit as HTML, editing attributes, and now it defines barrel rolls. So I do this. You see that there's this node object, which is like a model and backbone. It just wraps the data for an element and provides some accessor methods and some nice commands. And it has this function set attribute value. So if I set the style attribute for a node, I like apply some transitions. But if you think about this node object, it's kind of awesome. It knows everything it needs to know about this object. It knows this element has attributes. It knows its tag name. If you want to make an awesome extension to the elements panel, all you need is this node object, and you can do whatever you want to do. It's really not that bad. So that's Chrome DevTool debugging. Did you like it? Pretty good? All you need to do is git clone Chrome DevTools front end, and you can run this thing locally and go crazy. It's really neat. Actually, I'll show you one more thing, just because it's neat. So here's this element right here. Have you ever thought about how the element looks the way it does? Well, if we inspect it, it's just more HTML. It's just HTML to describe your HTML. That section element is really just a span with the WebKit HTML tag class. That's all it is. What's this tag over here? It's the tag name. This attribute, attribute name. It's just HTML. That's all. There. I promise you, you'd have fun if you look at this. There's so much good stuff in there. So, the third demo. I told you before that we're working on a new debugger for Firefox. What I didn't tell you is we're doing it a little bit differently than before. Obviously, we would like to be able to debug Chrome or Node as well. But there's a second piece to it. The second piece is we want everyone to contribute back to it. So we're trying to build it in GitHub as opposed to in Gecko. And we're using NPM, and we're using React and Redux, and all of these other great tools that make it incredibly developer-friendly. So let me show you what I mean. So I'm in the debugger HTML project, and you can go to GitHub and search for debugger HTML and find it. And if you want to get involved, clone the project, run npm install, npm start, and you're good. That's all you need. You start the server. And then you have to start Firefox, right? Like you need something to debug. So that's Firefox up there. And in my case, I also want to start Chrome. Because, you know, like, why not? So we have Chrome here, Firefox here. I need a third browser here. This is kind of the problem with doing any debugger work. It's nice to have at least 2 browsers open at the same time. And this page is just a prototype to show that's possible. It lists all the tabs in Firefox and all the tabs in Chrome you might want to debug. And it mentions Node. If you want to debug Node, that's possible too. You run Node, and it will show the Node process as like an endpoint you can connect to. And if you want to debug Firefox, you just like click on this tab, and you get a debugger. You can like select some source. No big deal. It's just a React app. If you want to debug Chrome, no big deal. It's just a React app. It's the same React app. We're talking different protocols over a WebSocket to the different browsers. It just works. I'll put a breakpoint in the initialize function, add a to-do, and we should pause. Wait, maybe I don't know which one I'm debugging. Oh, this is app view, sorry. To-do view. Now we're paused. When we got that demo after like a week of working on this, we're like, yes, we have a debugger. You can look at the call stack. And with Firefox, I'll show you here, you can also look at scopes. Actually, last week was the week when we started really looking at scopes, because this is still a prototype. Here's the call stack. Here's scopes. If I add a breakpoint in this other function, update on enter, and go to edit, you can see that this function over here has a parameter e, and there's the parameter e. Now, when I was working on this on Friday, I noticed there were a couple bugs. I don't know if you guys can see them, but notice how the label is blue and the selected background is blue? That's pretty ugly, right? Like, that should be fixed. The other thing is we have 2 scopes here, the local scope and the global scope. And it doesn't really make sense for scopes to have values. You see them when you expand the thing. So we should fix that. And the last thing, this E looks pretty ugly, right? Like it wraps and shows the values. We should clean that up. Now, if you wanted to make those contributions to Chrome DevTools or Firefox DevTools, you could. It's just JavaScript. But the workflow is a little frustrating. We've worked really hard on making the workflow fun. And that might be hard to believe because we're looking at the scopes pane. We're looking at how variables are shown. Like, this is complicated stuff, right? Well, not really. It's just a simple app that shows some values. So let me show you how we made these changes. We have this tool called Storybook, which is an open source tool, and anyone could use it. And when we run Storybook, you can see all of the components. So let's copy this URL. And it's like unit tests, but for debuggers, or for developers, actually, sorry. It shows the different components we have, like breakpoints here, scopes here, and they're just loading based on fixture data. Now, this is really powerful because I don't have to open to-do MVC, and then open my debugger, and then pause, and then open the call stack to see this. I just see it. And I can have all the examples that I want for this component, and then just toggle between them, and I see the change. So let's see here. We've got the scopes pane, and this is the example I care about. And the first thing is that the label is blue, and the selected value background is blue. So we should fix that. Got the code here. Here's the code for the scopes. Here's the CSS. You can see we don't have that much CSS yet, thankfully. And I can add this one class, focused scope object value, that makes the color white. And when I save this, it becomes white. Storybook uses hot reloading. And I don't have to pause to see the change. I just see it. Now, what else can we do? Well, the scopes have these values, right? Well, I can look in this code, and there's this function for rendering an item value, which could be a scope. And I have this if statement, object, if it's a scope, return nothing. If I turn this on and save, those values go away. Once again, I don't have to pause. I just see the change immediately. Storybook makes it really easy to do these things, and that's why we've been able to rebuild the debugger in like 2 months. The last change is objects. It turns out that objects are just too big to show on the right. It's simpler just to say, we have an object. We don't want to format them. So in this code here, we have an object value that's always formatted. But what we want is to say, if it's an object, say it's an object. Otherwise, format it. So when I save, it just says object. Storybook makes it really, really easy to do this stuff. And I guess this is a sales pitch for Storybook right now. But it's really a call to action. If you want to get involved in the debugger or any DevTools feature, you should. I wanted to feel like anyone can get involved and make a contribution and will help out. That is the point of this. Now, I have one more tool that's just a really fun dev tool that I want to demo. So I've got the debugger here, and you saw me use it. I have this tool for integration tests. Now, historically, running integration tests have been really painful, right? Like, no one wants to write integration tests. They're flaky. They're not good. Cypress has been trying to make it better. And here's an example of one. So in this test, let's call it a test, I open up ToDo MVC. I go to the ToDo view code. I add a breakpoint. Then I add a ToDo. Then I edit a ToDo. And then I pause. Writing these commands is as simple as saying, click here, type there, in either the debuggy or the debugger. It doesn't matter. And Cypress knows how to wait for something to be shown, to click, and then type all those things. It handles everything for me. And when I run it, here we go. I've got the app over here, and it goes through all those commands. And then after the fact, I can say, OK, what happened? Well, I clicked on Firefox. I then clicked on this JS thing. It expanded out. Then I clicked on views, expanded out. And eventually, I got all the way over here. I clicked on the call stack, and it showed the call stack. When you have tools like Cypress, it makes it easier to write tests. It also makes it really easy to change code. Notice how the call stack here shows 1, 2, 3. It shows the index of each frame. Well, let's say we wanted to change that. I have frame here, and I have this code for showing the index. If I save this, and I go back and I rerun this thing, it's going to open up the debugger, open up ToDo MVC, go to the file ToDo view, add a breakpoint, add a ToDo, edit a ToDo, pause, show me the call stack, and it doesn't have the index. I can then go back. I can then re-add it. And this is the dumb version. It just shows the index. Pause. And it's going to show the index, but it's going to look bad. It's like right on top. It pushes everything down. And then I can format it here, save, rerun, and you can see it looks better. Once again, we're working on a new debugger. We're using React. We're using Cypress. We're using Storybook. The development flow is really smooth. It's just like working on a web app. And we're looking for more contributors. So if you want to get involved, find me afterwards. Find Brian as well. We'd be happy to talk to you. And I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you.